My own son called me a financial parasite in front of 12 people. I'm William Davis, and I've been growing grapes in Napa Valley for 15 years. What Daniel didn't know when he demanded his mother divorce me was that every dollar he thought belonged to our family actually came from innovations I'd been quietly building since 2009. The agricultural empire he was so eager to inherit had my fingerprints on every patent, every partnership, every profitable decision Margaret and I ever made. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply asked our attorney to prepare what I called the full financial disclosure. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I want to hear about families who've had similar surprises, because what happened next changed everything Daniel thought he knew about success, respect, and who really built our $35 million estate. The pattern started 3 years ago, right after Daniel made senior associate at Goldman Sachs. It was Thanksgiving 2021. We were sitting around Margaret's dining table, the one I'd built from walnut trees on our property. Daniel had just gotten his bonus announcement, $480,000, plus his base salary. "Dad," he said, cutting his turkey with surgical precision, "I think it's time we discussed your situation." Margaret looked up from her wine. "What situation?" "The financial reality," Daniel continued. "I'm making more in 1 year than Dad probably made in the last 5. It's embarrassing when my colleagues ask what my family does." I kept eating. Margaret's face flushed. "Your father works very hard, Daniel. Growing grapes isn't exactly building generational wealth, Mom. My apartment in Tribeca costs $8,000 a month. That's probably more than Dad's entire annual income." That night I heard him on the phone with someone from his firm. I was checking irrigation lines near the guest house. His voice carried through the open window. "No, seriously. My stepdad is like this simple farmer guy. Wears Carhartt jackets and drives a beat-up Ford. Mom has all the real money from her family trust. I keep telling her she could do so much better." Stepdad. I'd raised Daniel since he was 7 years old. The second incident happened last Christmas. Daniel brought his girlfriend Emily, another banker, worked at Credit Suisse. They were staying for the holidays. Emily was polite enough, but I caught fragments of conversations. Comments about rustic charm and Margaret's unfortunate marriage situation. Daniel would laugh and agree. On December 27th, they were packing to leave. I was loading their bags into my 2018 F-150 Platinum. Emily whispered to Daniel, but I heard every word. "Your mom seems so sophisticated, I can't figure out what she sees in him." Daniel shrugged. "Honestly, I think she feels sorry for him. He's completely dependent on her financially. Classic case of a woman settling for security over ambition." That evening, after they left, Margaret found me in my office behind the barn. She looked tired. "Bill, I think we need to have a conversation about Daniel." "About what?" "His attitude toward you, toward us." I turned from my computer screen. 3 monitors displaying commodity futures, agricultural patents pending approval, and email correspondence with UC Davis researchers. "He's young, Margaret. Success can make people forget where they came from. He didn't come from poverty, Bill, and neither did we." She was right, of course, but Daniel had convinced himself of a story. In his version, Margaret was the wealthy widow who'd married beneath her station. I was the charity case who got lucky. What Daniel never bothered to investigate was how that wealth actually got built. See, when people looked at me, they saw the obvious things. Work boots covered in vineyard dirt, hands stained from handling irrigation equipment. A man who drove a pickup truck and wore the same Carhartt jacket 3 days running. They didn't see the other details. The patents filed with the U.S. Agricultural Department, the research partnerships with major universities, the quiet consulting work with agricultural technology companies. Most importantly, they didn't see the business structures Margaret and I had carefully built together since 2009. But Daniel was about to learn the difference between looking successful and actually being successful. Because 3 months after that Christmas conversation, Margaret died suddenly from liver cancer. The diagnosis came in January. She was gone by March, and that's when Daniel's sense of entitlement reached levels I could no longer ignore. The first thing Daniel did after Margaret's funeral was schedule a meeting with her financial advisor, without including me. Frank Anderson called me on March 15th. He'd been managing Margaret's portfolio at Morgan Stanley Private Wealth for 12 years. "Bill, I need to give you a heads up. Daniel contacted my office yesterday. He wants to discuss family financial planning, and specifically requested that you not be present. Did you agree to meet with him?" I told him any discussion about Margaret's estate would need to include you, obviously, but he seemed very confident about his legal position. That same week, Daniel started making demands. Phone calls that began pleasantly but quickly turned aggressive. "Dad, I think we need to be realistic about the situation. Mom left behind a substantial estate, and I need to understand my inheritance timeline." "The estate is being handled through proper legal channels, Daniel." "Right, but let's talk numbers. The vineyard property alone has to be worth $15 million, plus whatever securities and cash assets Mom had accumulated. I'm looking at purchasing a place in the Hamptons, and my financial planner needs clarity on available funds." This was the first time Daniel had ever mentioned owning property. His Tribeca apartment was a rental. "Daniel, your mother and I built this estate together. The inheritance structure reflects that reality." "Come on, Dad. We both know Mom was the one with the business sense. You're a great guy, but farming isn't exactly high finance." The pressure intensified over the following weeks. Daniel would call Margaret's attorney directly, trying to expedite the probate process. He contacted her accountant, asking for detailed asset breakdowns. Then came the ultimatum. It was April 3rd. Daniel flew out from New York, specifically for this conversation. We were sitting in the vineyard tasting room, late afternoon sun filtering through the valley. "Dad, I'm going to be direct. I need access to my inheritance within the next 60 days. The estate process takes time, Daniel. I'm not talking about the full amount. I need a substantial advance, $5 million minimum." I stayed quiet. "Look, I respect what you've contributed to this family, but the reality is, you're financially dependent on what Mom built. The responsible thing is for you to step aside and let me manage the family assets going forward." Here was the choice. I could maintain family peace by accepting Daniel's version of reality. Let him believe his mother had been the sole architect of our wealth. Or I could show him exactly what 15 years of agricultural innovation actually looks like when you build it systematically. The stakes weren't just financial. They were about respect, truth, and whether I'd spend my remaining years being treated like hired help in my own home. I made my decision. The confrontation started at Daniel's insistence. He called on April 10th with an announcement. "Dad, I've scheduled a family meeting for this Saturday. We need to get everything on the table." "What kind of meeting?" "Financial planning session. I've invited Emily, plus Margaret's attorney and accountant. Time to discuss the estate distribution timeline." Saturday arrived with perfect Napa Valley weather. 72 degrees. Light breeze through the vineyard rows. I was checking soil moisture levels when cars started arriving. Daniel pulled up in a rented BMW sedan. Emily emerged wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Behind them came Patricia Williams, our estate attorney, followed by James Morrison, Margaret's longtime CPA. We gathered in the main house living room. Margaret had designed this space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley. Today it felt more like a boardroom than a family home. Daniel didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Thanks everyone for coming. We need to establish a clear timeline for estate distribution." Patricia Williams opened her briefcase. "Daniel, as I've explained, your mother's will has specific provisions that require careful review." "What kind of provisions?" "Complex asset distribution structures. Some holdings have partnership agreements that affect inheritance terms." Daniel's confidence never wavered. "Whatever the structures are, I'm sure we can work through them efficiently." Emily nodded supportively. "Daniel has experience with complicated financial instruments." That's when I spoke up. "Daniel, before we discuss distribution, shouldn't we clarify what assets actually exist? Dad, we've been through this. The vineyard property, Mom's securities portfolio, cash assets. I've done my research." "What research specifically?" Daniel pulled out his phone, consulting notes. "Property records show 340 acres purchased in 2009 for $8.2 million. Current Napa Valley farmland averages $53,000 per acre. That's roughly $18 million in real estate value." He'd done his homework, but only surface level. "Go on," I said. "Plus Mom's Morgan Stanley account. Based on her lifestyle and spending patterns, I estimate she had accumulated between $12, $15 million in securities." Patricia Williams glanced at me. I nodded slightly. "Daniel," she said carefully, "there are additional business entities involved in this estate." "What kind of entities? Limited liability companies, research partnerships, intellectual property holdings?" Daniel waved this off. "Probably just tax structures Mom set up, standard wealth management stuff." Emily leaned forward. "Daniel's seen dozens of these arrangements at Goldman. Family trusts, LLC formations for tax optimization. Actually, I said, they're operational business entities. Operational how? Revenue generating, technology licensing, agricultural research partnerships. Daniel laughed. Dad, with all due respect, growing grapes doesn't require complex technology licensing. Precision viticulture does. Precision what? Patricia Williams intervened. Perhaps we should review the actual business formation documents. She pulled out a thick folder. Davis Agricultural Innovations, LLC, formed in 2010. Daniel's expression shifted slightly. Okay, so Mom created a business entity. That's smart tax planning. The formation documents list 2 managing partners, Patricia continued. Mom and who else? Your father? Silence filled the room. Emily looked confused. Daniel's jaw tightened. Managing partners in what exactly? Agricultural technology development? Patent licensing? Research consulting? Daniel turned to me. You never mentioned any patents. You never asked about my work. Your work is farming. Farming is one component of agricultural technology development. James Morrison, who'd been quiet until now, cleared his throat. Daniel, your parents have been running a sophisticated agricultural innovation business for 14 years. How sophisticated? Current annual revenue from patent licensing exceeds $1.2 million. The number hung in the air like smoke from a vineyard burn pile. Daniel processed this slowly. Patent licensing for what? Water management systems? Precision irrigation technology? Sustainable farming equipment? Dad developed these patents? Patricia nodded. William holds primary inventor status on 3 major agricultural patents currently licensed to companies like John Deere and Netafim Irrigation. Daniel looked at me differently now. Not with respect exactly, but with the wariness of someone realizing they'd miscalculated. So, the estate includes intellectual property assets. Substantial intellectual property assets, Patricia confirmed. But Mom was still the primary wealth builder, right? This is just supplemental income. I stood up slowly. Walked to the window overlooking our 340 acres of precisely managed vineyard rows. Daniel, who do you think designed the irrigation systems you're looking at right now? His face began to change, the first crack in his absolute certainty. We need to schedule a more comprehensive review, Patricia said. There are additional documents that need examination. Daniel was already calculating, trying to maintain his position, but the foundation of his assumptions had just developed serious cracks. 3 days after the meeting, Daniel started his own investigation. I found out because Dr. Sarah Thompson called me on Wednesday morning. She's an agricultural economist at UC Davis and has been my research partner for 6 years. Bill, I got a strange call yesterday. Someone claiming to be your son, asking about our research collaboration. What did he want to know? Specifics about your patents, revenue projections from our sustainability studies. He seemed surprised when I mentioned your lead role in the Precision Agriculture project. Daniel was trying to verify what he'd learned. Problem was, the more he dug, the more questions emerged. That same afternoon, Emily called me directly. Her voice was different from the polite tone she'd used at the estate meeting. Mr. Davis, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. Daniel's been researching your agricultural work, and we're finding some confusing information. What kind of confusion? Well, property records show multiple LLC registrations under your name. Davis Agricultural Innovations, Valley Precision Systems, Sustainable Farming Technologies. These aren't just tax entities, are they? I was replacing irrigation sensors in Block C when she called. The new precision monitoring system I designed could track soil moisture levels across 340 acres from my phone. No, Emily, they're operating businesses. Operating how? Daniel said you just grow grapes. I develop agricultural technology systems. The grape growing is one application of those systems. Silence on her end. Mr. Davis, can I ask you something directly? Sure. How much revenue do these businesses generate annually? Why don't you ask Daniel to include that question in his research? He's trying to, but the information is complicated. Emily was starting to understand that Daniel's simple narrative had some major gaps. Friday evening, Daniel called. His tone was different too, less demanding, more confused. Dad, I've been looking into your business activities, and there are things that don't make sense. Like what? Like the patent royalty payments. James Morrison mentioned $1.2 million annually, but I found licensing agreements with companies I've never heard of, such as Netafim Irrigation, Rainbird Corporation, Valley Irrigation. Are these real companies? I almost laughed. Daniel, Netafim is the largest irrigation technology company in the world. Rainbird is a Fortune 500 agricultural equipment manufacturer. So these companies pay you licensing fees? They pay licensing fees for technologies I developed, yes. What technologies exactly? Micro-irrigation efficiency systems, precision water management algorithms, sustainable farming equipment designs. Another long pause. Dad, how long have you been developing these technologies? Since 2009. Why didn't you ever mention this? You never seemed interested in what I actually do for work. Saturday morning, Daniel showed up unannounced. I was in my office behind the barn reviewing quarterly royalty statements from 3 different companies. He knocked on the door frame. Dad, can we talk? Of course. He looked around my office space. 3 large monitors displaying agricultural data, patent documentation scattered across my desk, engineering drawings for irrigation systems pinned to the wall. This doesn't look like a farmer's office. What does a farmer's office look like? I don't know. Simpler, I guess. Daniel picked up a document from my desk. Provisional patent application for solar-powered micro-irrigation array, filed by William Davis. That's my latest project. When did you file this? Last month. He set the paper down carefully. Dad, there's something I need to ask you directly. Go ahead. Mom's estate, the $35 million value that Patricia mentioned. How much of that money actually came from your work? I turned in my chair to face him fully. Daniel, that's exactly what we're going to find out at the estate reading next week. His face went pale. What estate reading? The formal will reading. Patricia scheduled it for Tuesday afternoon. You didn't mention an estate reading. You didn't ask. Daniel realized he'd been operating with incomplete information, but he still had no idea how incomplete. The real revelations were just beginning. Tuesday arrived with fog rolling through the valley, the kind of morning that makes Napa look mysterious and ancient. Daniel drove up from San Francisco with Emily and 2 colleagues from Goldman Sachs. He'd invited his co-workers without asking me. Dad, meet Jessica Chen and Marcus Williams. They're both in wealth management at Goldman. I thought it would be helpful to have professional perspective on Mom's estate structure. Jessica was maybe 30, wearing a sharp business suit and carrying a leather portfolio. Marcus looked older, more senior, with the confidence of someone accustomed to handling large estates. Mr. Davis, Marcus said, extending his hand, Daniel's told us so much about your family's agricultural operation. We're fascinated by the intersection of farming and financial planning. His tone was polite but patronizing, the way city professionals talk to people they consider quaint. Daniel mentioned you've been working this land for 15 years, Jessica added. It must be satisfying working with your hands. Emily nodded approvingly. There's something authentic about agricultural life, so much more meaningful than corporate finance. They were being kind, but their kindness felt like charity. We gathered in the living room at 2 p.m. Patricia Williams arrived precisely on time, carrying 3 large briefcases and accompanied by Frank Anderson from Morgan Stanley. Daniel had arranged chairs in a semicircle, positioning himself at the center with his Goldman colleagues flanking him like advisors. Before we begin, Patricia announced, I should mention that today's reading will be comprehensive. Margaret's estate involves multiple asset categories that require detailed explanation. Daniel nodded confidently. We're prepared for complexity. Marcus opened his portfolio. I've brought valuation templates for agricultural properties and securities portfolios. This should streamline the process. Patricia exchanged glances with Frank Anderson. Actually, the asset categories are somewhat unique. Unique how? Jessica asked. Intellectual property holdings, technology licensing revenues, research partnership equity stakes. Daniel waved this off. Dad mentioned some agricultural patents. We factored those into our preliminary valuations. What valuations did you calculate? Frank asked. Marcus consulted his notes. Based on comparable Napa Valley properties, we estimated $18 million in real estate value. Securities portfolio approximately $12, $15 million depending on Margaret's investment allocation. Agricultural IP assets maybe $2, $3 million maximum. So total estate value around $35 million, Daniel concluded, which aligns with what we'd expected. Emily leaned forward. The question is inheritance distribution. Daniel's primary concern is timeline and access. Patricia opened her first briefcase. Let's start with property ownership documentation. She pulled out a thick folder. The 340-acre vineyard property was purchased in 2009 for $8.2 million. Current appraised value is $18.02 million. Daniel smiled. His math had been accurate.
However, Patricia continued, the property ownership structure is joint tenancy with rights of survivorship. Meaning, both Margaret and William held equal ownership stakes. Upon Margaret's death, full ownership transferred to William. Daniel's smile faltered. So Dad owns the entire property? That's correct. Marcus looked confused. But surely Margaret had separate assets. Frank Anderson opened his briefcase. Let's review the Morgan Stanley portfolio. He spread documents across the coffee table. Margaret's account shows total holdings of $12.8 million in securities. Daniel brightened again. So the securities are mine to inherit. Actually, Frank said carefully, these accounts were joint holdings. Margaret and William were co-account holders with survivor beneficiary status. What does that mean? It means William now owns these securities outright. Jessica frowned. That seems unusual for estate planning. Not when both spouses contributed equally to asset accumulation, Patricia explained. Daniel's confidence began cracking. Wait, what do you mean contributed equally? We'll get to that. Let's continue with the asset review. Patricia opened her second briefcase. Intellectual property portfolio, Davis Agricultural Innovations, LLC. She laid out patent certificates, licensing agreements, and royalty statements. 3 major patents currently generating revenue. Micro-irrigation efficiency systems. Precision water management algorithms. Solar-powered agricultural equipment designs. Marcus examined the documents. These patents are registered under Davis Agricultural Innovations? Correct. Who owns Davis Agricultural Innovations? William Davis holds 60% ownership. Margaret held 40%. Daniel stared at the papers. 60%. The ownership distribution reflects each partner's contribution to patent development and business operations. Emily spoke up. But surely Margaret's 40% stake is inheritable. Under normal circumstances, yes. However, the LLC operating agreement includes specific succession clauses. What kind of clauses? Patricia pulled out the operating agreement. 23 pages of legal language. In the event of a partner's death, their ownership stake reverts to the surviving partner, provided certain performance criteria are met. What performance criteria? Continued active participation in business operations. Maintenance of patent licensing relationships. Ongoing research and development activities. The room fell silent. Daniel was calculating frantically. So Dad owns the property, the securities, and the intellectual property. The vast majority, yes. Marcus looked genuinely confused. Daniel, you mentioned your father was primarily a farmer. I thought he was. Mr. Davis, Jessica addressed me directly, could you clarify your role in building these assets? This was the moment. Daniel's Goldman Sachs colleagues were about to learn exactly who they had been patronizing. I developed the agricultural technologies, filed the patents, negotiated the licensing agreements, designed the irrigation systems, built the business relationships. And Margaret's role? Margaret handled public relations, marketing, and client communications. She was the face of our operation. Marcus was reading the patent documents. These technologies are licensed to major agricultural corporations, John Deere, Netafim Irrigation, Rainbird Corporation, and several others. For how much? Frank Anderson consulted his files. Current annual licensing revenue is $1.37 million. Jessica looked stunned. So you're telling us that Mr. Davis generated the majority of this estate's value? Patricia nodded. According to our analysis, approximately 73% of total estate value derives from William's intellectual property and business development work. Daniel's face had gone completely white. His Goldman Sachs colleagues were staring at him with expressions of professional embarrassment. The simple farmer story had just collapsed entirely. Patricia opened her third briefcase. This one contained the actual will. Before we proceed with inheritance distribution, I need to provide complete context about asset origins and development. She pulled out a timeline document. Margaret and William's financial partnership, 2009 to 2024. 2009. William retires early from commodities trading with $2.1 million in accumulated wealth. Daniel interrupted. Dad was a commodities trader? 15 years with Cargill Corporation. Agricultural futures, precision farming consultancy, technology assessment. Marcus leaned forward. What kind of commodities trading? Grain futures, livestock markets, agricultural technology investments, I said. I specialized in analyzing how farming innovations affected crop yields and market pricing. Patricia continued reading. 2009. William and Margaret purchased 340-acre Napa Valley property for $8.2 million.
Financing structure. William's retirement funds provide $2.1 million down payment. Margaret secures $6.1 million agricultural loan. 2010. William files first provisional patent for micro-irrigation efficiency system. She handed Daniel the patent application. Filed March 15, 2010. William Davis, primary inventor. 2011. Davis Agricultural Innovations, LLC established. Initial licensing agreement with Rainbird Corporation for $180,000 annually. Emily was taking notes frantically. So you were generating licensing revenue from year 2? The first commercial application was modest, I explained. But it validated the technology's market potential, Patricia continued. 2012. Second patent filed for precision water management algorithms. John Deere expresses licensing interest. 2013. Margaret begins public relations and marketing role for Davis Agricultural Innovations. First media coverage in Agricultural Technology Weekly. She showed us a magazine article from February 2013. Headline: Napa Valley couple revolutionizes precision irrigation. Daniel read the article summary. This describes Dad as the lead engineer and Margaret as business development director. 2014. Third patent approved for solar-powered agricultural equipment designs. Netafim Irrigation signs 5-year licensing agreement for $320,000 annually. Marcus was calculating rapidly. So by 2014, you had 3 patents generating roughly $500,000 in annual revenue? $487,000 to be precise. Frank Anderson confirmed. 2015, UC Davis partnership established. William becomes research affiliate in Agricultural Engineering Department. Jessica looked up from her notes. You hold a university research position? Research affiliate. I collaborate on precision agriculture studies and sustainable farming technology development. Patricia pulled out university correspondence. Letters from Dr. Robert Martinez, Department Chair, Agricultural Engineering. Quote, Mr. Davis's irrigation innovations represent the most significant advancement in water conservation technology we've seen in 2 decades. 2016. Forbes magazine features Davis Agricultural Innovations in Quiet Agricultural Innovators article. She handed around the Forbes article. March 2016 issue. Daniel read aloud. William Davis has transformed traditional farming through precision technology applications that reduce water usage by 40% while increasing crop yields by 23%. The article estimated our annual patent revenue at $640,000, I added. 2017. DARPA research contract awarded for drought-resistant agricultural systems. Marcus stopped writing. DARPA? The Defense Department? Department of Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Patricia confirmed. 3-year contract worth $480,000 for developing agricultural systems capable of operating in water-scarce environments. Emily looked confused. Why would the Defense Department fund agricultural research? Food security is national security, I explained. Military installations need reliable crop production in challenging environments. 2018. Tesla Energy Partnership established. Solar irrigation systems integrated with Tesla Powerwall technology. Patricia showed us the Tesla contract. Revenue sharing agreement worth $280,000 annually. 2019. 4th patent filed for automated crop monitoring systems. Initial licensing interest from Amazon Agriculture Division. Daniel was staring at the documents. Amazon has an agriculture division? Amazon Web Services provides cloud computing for precision agriculture applications, I said. Our monitoring systems integrate with their IoT platform. 2020, COVID-19 increases demand for automated farming technology. Licensing revenue reaches $1.1 million annually. Frank Anderson consulted his records. 2020 was our highest revenue year prior to 2023. 2021, 5th patent approved for AI-assisted irrigation scheduling. Google Agriculture AI expresses licensing interest. Jessica was shaking her head slowly. This is a completely different business than we understood. 2022. Margaret diagnosed with early-stage liver cancer. Treatment successful, prognosis excellent. Patricia's voice softened. Margaret was determined to expand the business during her recovery. She increased marketing efforts and secured new licensing partnerships. 2022. Partnership established with Israeli water technology firm Netafim for international licensing. Revenue increases to $1.25 million annually. 2023. Margaret's cancer returns aggressively. Despite treatment, her condition deteriorates rapidly. 2023. Sixth patent filed for climate adaptive irrigation systems. Preliminary licensing interest exceeds $400,000 annually. Marcus looked up. So current annual patent revenue is approximately $1.65 million? $1.67 million as of December 2023, Frank confirmed. Patricia opened the will document. Now we can discuss inheritance distribution with complete context. She cleared her throat formally. Last will and testament of Margaret Louise Davis, executed January 15, 2024. To my beloved husband William, you have been my partner in every sense. Your brilliant mind and patient innovation built the foundation of our success. You deserve recognition for your extraordinary contributions to agricultural science and our family's prosperity. Daniel was listening with growing dread. Asset distribution. The 340-acre vineyard property, currently valued at $18.02 million, remains entirely under William's ownership as previously established through joint tenancy. The Morgan Stanley Securities portfolio, currently valued at $12.8 million, remains entirely under William's ownership as previously established through joint beneficiary status. Davis Agricultural Innovations LLC, with current annual revenue of $1.67 million and estimated asset value of $8.3 million, remains under Williams' majority ownership as established in the original operating agreement. Patricia paused. Total estate value under Williams' direct ownership, $39.12 million. The number hung in the air like thunder before lightning. Daniel's voice was barely audible. $39 million? Assets specifically designated for inheritance by Daniel Davis. Education trust fund valued at $500,000. Contingent upon completion of advanced education in agricultural technology, business administration, or related field. $500,000, Emily whispered. Additionally, Margaret's personal jewelry collection, valued at approximately $125,000. Additionally, 1/4 ownership stake in Davis Agricultural Innovations LLC, valued at approximately $2.1 million, contingent upon active participation in business operations for a minimum of 3 years. Marcus was calculating frantically. So Daniel's total inheritance is approximately $2.7 million, conditional upon education and work requirements? That's correct. The Goldman Sachs wealth management expert sat in stunned silence. Daniel had invited them to witness his inheritance of a $35 million estate. Instead, they'd witnessed the revelation that his simple farmer father had built a $39 million agricultural technology empire, and that Daniel's inheritance was less than 7% of the total estate value. Jessica closed her portfolio. Daniel, I think we may have misunderstood your family's financial situation. Marcus was more direct. Your father appears to be significantly wealthier than you indicated. Emily hadn't spoken in 10 minutes. She was staring at the patent documents like they contained nuclear launch codes. Daniel finally found his voice. Dad, I had no idea. You never asked. But I assumed. You assumed I was financially dependent on your mother. Yes. Instead, your mother was financially dependent on technologies I developed. Patricia began packing documents back into her briefcases. The estate reading is complete. Daniel, you have 90 days to decide whether you'll accept the inheritance conditions. What if I don't accept them? The conditional assets revert to William's full ownership. Daniel looked around the room. His Goldman Sachs colleagues were avoiding eye contact. Emily was studying her hands. The entire foundation of his identity as the sophisticated city professional, educating his simple country father, had just been demolished. But the consequences were just beginning. The inheritance conditions weren't punitive. They were educational. Patricia explained the specifics while Daniel's colleagues sat in uncomfortable silence. The education requirement, completion of either a master's degree in agricultural technology, an MBA with focus on intellectual property management, or equivalent professional certification in precision agriculture. How long do I have? Daniel asked. Standard graduate programs require 18 to 24 months. You have 36 months maximum to complete the requirement. And the work requirement? Active participation in Davis Agricultural Innovations business operations. Minimum 3 years, 20 hours per week. Responsibilities include patent research, client relationship management, technology development support. Marcus cleared his throat. Daniel, these conditions seem quite reasonable for a $2.1 million business stake. Daniel wasn't looking at his colleagues anymore. He was staring at me. Dad, why these specific requirements? Because you've spent 3 years telling me I don't understand business or technology. This is your opportunity to learn what I actually do, Emily finally spoke. Mr. Davis, the work requirement. Would Daniel be working directly with you? He'd be learning agricultural technology development, patent licensing, and precision farming systems. Whether he learns effectively depends on his attitude. Jessica was packing her materials. Daniel, we should probably discuss timeline implications. Taking 18 months for graduate education would impact your Goldman Sachs career trajectory. What do you mean? Senior associate to VP promotion typically happens within 4 years. Educational sabbatical could delay that timeline. Marcus was more blunt. You'd need to request extended leave or resign your position to pursue full-time graduate education. Daniel hadn't considered this conflict, his banking career versus his inheritance requirements. Could I do part-time education while maintaining my Goldman position? Patricia consulted the will language. The education requirement specifies full-time enrollment or equivalent professional development. Part-time programs extending beyond 36 months wouldn't qualify. So I have to choose between my current career and my inheritance? You have to choose between continuing your current path or learning about the business you've been criticizing for 3 years. Frank Anderson had been quietly reviewing financial documents. Daniel, there's another consideration. The business stake isn't just an inheritance. It's an active investment. Meaning, Davis Agricultural Innovations is expanding. 2 new patents pending approval. Licensing negotiations with European agricultural companies. Projected revenue growth to $2.3 million annually within 2 years. Your 25% stake would generate approximately $575,000 annual income, Patricia added. Marcus looked up sharply. That's significantly more than your Goldman Sachs total compensation, but only if I meet the work requirements. Correct. Daniel was calculating options. What happens if I refuse the inheritance entirely? The conditional assets revert to William. You receive only the education trust fund and jewelry collection. So $625,000 total? Yes. Emily leaned over to Daniel. That's less than your annual Goldman income. But accepting the inheritance means leaving Goldman, or taking extended leave for education and then transitioning to agricultural technology. The Goldman colleagues were starting to understand the situation differently now. Jessica addressed me directly. Mr. Davis, what's the long-term vision for Davis Agricultural Innovations? Patent portfolio expansion, international licensing, research partnerships with major agricultural corporations. Eventually, we'll probably consider acquisition offers. Acquisition by whom? John Deere has expressed interest, so has Netafim. Technology companies like Amazon and Google are developing agricultural divisions. Marcus was taking notes again. What kind of acquisition valuations are we discussing? Conservative estimates suggest $20, $25 million for our current patent portfolio. With expansion, potentially $40, $50 million within 5 years. Daniel's inheritance stake could become worth $10, $12 million. But only if he learned the business. Dad, can I ask you something directly? Of course. Why didn't you tell me about any of this earlier? Because you weren't interested in learning. You were interested in inheriting. Emily nodded slowly. That's a fair distinction. Patricia was preparing to leave. Daniel, you have 90 days to decide. The inheritance documents will remain with our office until you notify us of your choice. What kind of graduate programs would qualify for the education requirement? Agricultural technology programs at UC Davis, Cornell, Iowa State, MBA programs with intellectual property focus at Stanford, Wharton, Northwestern, professional certification through the American Society of Agricultural Engineers. Marcus closed his portfolio. Daniel, from a financial perspective, this inheritance structure is quite sophisticated. How so? It ensures knowledge transfer while providing substantial financial incentive. Your father has built a business worth participating in, not just inheriting, Jessica agreed. The conditions protect both the business continuity and your own professional development. Daniel looked around the room one more time. His Goldman colleagues were treating him differently now. Not as the sophisticated banker educating his simple father, but as someone who'd seriously misjudged a complex situation. Dad, if I accept these conditions, would you want me to learn the business? I'd want you to respect the business. Learning would follow naturally. And if I can't handle the work? then you'd discover that agricultural technology development requires skills you might not currently possess. Emily stood up. Daniel, we should probably head back to the city. You have some serious thinking to do. As they prepared to leave, Marcus shook my hand. Mr. Davis, it's been educational meeting you. Your agricultural innovations sound fascinating. Thank you. Jessica was more direct. Daniel, you might want to reconsider some of your assumptions about traditional versus modern careers. After they left, Daniel lingered in the living room. Dad, I owe you an apology. For what specifically? For underestimating you. For assuming Mom was the one with business sense. For treating you like you were financially dependent. Apology accepted. But we both knew acceptance was just the beginning. The real question was whether Daniel could handle learning he'd been wrong about everything. The news traveled fast through Daniel's professional network. 3 days after the estate reading, Frank Anderson called me. Bill, you should know Daniel's situation is becoming public knowledge in financial circles. How public? Goldman Sachs colleagues are discussing it. The story is spreading through Manhattan banking networks. Apparently, Jessica and Marcus had shared the estate details with other wealth management professionals. Not maliciously, but as an interesting case study in hidden family wealth. The narrative was irresistible. Cocky investment banker discovers his simple farmer father built a $39 million agricultural technology empire. By Friday, Daniel was facing uncomfortable questions at work. His managing director, Stephen Robertson, called him into a closed-door meeting. Daniel, I've been hearing interesting stories about your family situation. What kind of stories? That your father holds patents worth millions of dollars, that you've been publicly describing him as financially dependent on your mother. Daniel had no good response. Stephen, I had incomplete information about my father's business activities. Incomplete enough that you brought Goldman colleagues to what you thought would be your inheritance of a $35 million estate? Yes. And instead discovered your inheritance is $625,000 unless you leave Goldman to learn agricultural technology? That's accurate. Stephen Robertson had been in wealth management for 25 years. He'd seen every variety of family financial drama. Daniel, this raises questions about your judgment and research capabilities. I understand your concern. Do you? Because you've been advising clients on estate planning and wealth management while completely misunderstanding your own family's financial structure. That conversation led to a formal performance review. HR wanted to understand how Daniel could provide financial advice professionally while being so wrong about his personal situation. Emily's reaction was more direct. She came to Daniel's Tribeca apartment Saturday evening. I know this because Daniel called me afterward. Dad, Emily and I broke up. I'm sorry to hear that. She said she can't date someone who would publicly embarrass his family the way I embarrassed you. What specifically did she say? That she was mortified by how I talked about you in front of your attorney and her colleagues. That she realized I have poor character judgment. Emily had also done her own research after the estate reading. She'd looked up my patents, read the Forbes article, investigated Davis Agricultural Innovations business partnerships. She found the UC Davis faculty webpage listing me as research affiliate, Daniel continued, found articles about my collaboration with Tesla Energy, found LinkedIn recommendations from agricultural technology executives, and she realized I either never bothered to research what you actually do, or I knew and chose to lie about it. Which was it? I never bothered to research. That admission cost Daniel his relationship. But the professional consequences were more serious. Stephen Robertson recommended that Daniel take extended leave to resolve family conflicts and reassess career priorities. Translation. Goldman Sachs didn't want a wealth management advisor who couldn't manage his own family's wealth dynamics. Daniel called me Tuesday evening. Dad, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. The inheritance conditions. Were you trying to punish me or educate me? What's the difference? Punishment is about making me suffer for being wrong. Education is about teaching me to be right. Which do you think it is? Honestly, I'm hoping it's education. Why? Because I'm starting to realize how much I don't know about what you've built. That conversation was the beginning of Daniel's actual education. He'd spent 3 years dismissing agricultural technology as unsophisticated work. Now he was researching precision agriculture programs at major universities. UC Davis had a master's in agricultural engineering with focus on irrigation technology. Cornell offered an MBA agricultural technology dual degree. Iowa State had partnerships with John Deere for precision farming certification. Daniel was discovering that agricultural technology was significantly more complex than he'd assumed. Friday afternoon, he drove up from San Francisco to visit the vineyard. First time he'd come alone since Margaret's funeral. He found me in Block C calibrating soil moisture sensors that communicated with automated irrigation controllers. Dad, can you show me how this system works? You genuinely want to learn? I genuinely want to understand what I've been dismissing. We spent 2 hours walking through the vineyard. I explained precision viticulture, soil analysis, moisture monitoring, nutrient optimization, pest management integration. Daniel took notes, asked technical questions, listened without interrupting. Dad, this is actually engineering. Agriculture has always been engineering. We just use living systems instead of mechanical ones. But the technology integration, the data analysis, the system optimization, this is as complex as financial modeling. More complex. Financial models deal with predictable mathematical relationships. Agricultural systems involve weather, soil chemistry, plant biology, pest behavior, market timing. So when you develop irrigation algorithms, you're creating decision-making systems for multiple variable inputs? Exactly. Daniel was beginning to understand why agricultural technology patents generated substantial licensing revenue. Dad, the John Deere partnership, how does that work? We develop precision irrigation algorithms. John Deere integrates our software into their equipment. Farmers purchase John Deere systems that include our technology. We receive royalties based on units sold. So your intellectual property scales across thousands of farming operations? Currently about 12,000 installations across 14 states, Daniel calculated quickly. 12,000 installations generating $1, 67 million annually. That's roughly $140 per installation per year. $139.17 to be precise. And as John Deere sells more equipment, your royalty revenue increases? Correct. Dad, this is a recurring revenue technology business. That's exactly what it is. Daniel spent the rest of the afternoon asking detailed questions about patent licensing, technology development, university research partnerships, corporate collaboration agreements. By evening, he'd filled 15 pages with notes. Dad, I need to tell you something. What's that? I think I've been an idiot for 3 years. About what specifically? About everything. About you, about Mom, about what constitutes real business success. Why do you think that? Because you built a $39 million technology company while I was earning a salary working for someone else's technology company. Different types of success, Daniel. No, Dad. Different levels of success. You created intellectual property. I execute other people's financial strategies. That insight was the foundation for Daniel's decision. Sunday evening, he called Patricia Williams. I want to accept the inheritance conditions. You've decided to pursue the education requirement? UC Davis Agricultural Engineering, Master's Program. I've already requested application materials. And you understand the work requirement? 3 years minimum participation in Davis Agricultural Innovations. I'm hoping Dad will teach me the business. Patricia made notes. I'll prepare the acceptance documents. Patricia, can I ask you something? Of course. When you and Mom structured this will, did you expect this outcome? Margaret hoped you'd eventually appreciate your father's accomplishments. She thought education and experience might change your perspective. She was right. But accepting the inheritance was the easy part. Learning agricultural technology while rebuilding his relationship with his father would require completely different skills than Daniel had ever developed. The real test was just beginning. 6 months later, Daniel was in his second semester at UC Davis. Agricultural engineering wasn't what he'd expected. The coursework combined advanced mathematics, soil chemistry, plant biology, hydrology, computer programming, and systems engineering. Professor Martinez, who'd collaborated with me for years, pulled Daniel aside after his midterm exam. Your father's work is brilliant, but it's also extremely challenging to replicate. I hope you understand what you're attempting to learn. Daniel was discovering that agricultural technology required skills he'd never developed at Goldman Sachs. His financial modeling expertise helped with economic analysis, but precision agriculture demanded understanding of biological systems, environmental variables, and engineering principles. He called me twice weekly with questions. Dad, I'm struggling with soil chemistry calculations. The nutrient optimization algorithms don't make sense to me. Soil chemistry is like financial portfolio analysis, but with living variables that change based on weather, season, crop growth stage, and irrigation timing. But how do you predict optimal nutrient delivery when you can't control rain? You build adaptive systems that adjust automatically based on sensor data. These conversations were different from our previous 3 years of communication. Daniel was asking to learn rather than demanding to inherit. Spring semester, he started working at Davis Agricultural Innovations 20 hours weekly. His first assignment was updating client communication materials, reading licensing agreements, researching partner companies, analyzing competitive technologies. Dad, I never realized how many companies use our irrigation patents.
Technology licensing is like intellectual property rental. We develop solutions, other companies implement them, farmers benefit from improved efficiency. And everyone profits? When innovation creates value, there's enough benefit to share among all participants. Daniel was learning business principles I'd tried to explain for years. By summer, he was participating in actual technology development, working with UC Davis researchers, testing new sensor configurations, analyzing data from pilot installations. Dad, the precision monitoring project, I think I understand why the algorithms need machine learning integration. Explain it to me. Agricultural variables are too complex for static programming. The system needs to learn from outcomes and adjust decision-making patterns automatically. Now you're thinking like an agricultural engineer. September brought Daniel's first client presentation.
Netafim Irrigation wanted to discuss expanding our licensing partnership for international markets. Daniel had prepared a comprehensive analysis of European agricultural markets, regulatory requirements, competitive positioning, and revenue projections. William, said David Chen, Netafim's VP of Technology Licensing, your son's presentation is impressive. This market analysis is quite sophisticated. After the meeting, Daniel seemed different, more confident but also more humble. Dad, I think I'm starting to understand what you and Mom built together. What do you understand? That innovation takes time, that building something valuable requires patience, that real wealth comes from creating solutions that benefit other people. Those are important insights. I also understand why you structured the inheritance the way you did. Why? Because inheriting money without understanding how it was earned creates entitlement. Learning to create value builds character.
That conversation marked a shift in our relationship. Daniel wasn't my stepson trying to inherit wealth anymore. He was my business partner, learning to contribute value. Christmas 2024, Daniel brought his new girlfriend Sarah to the vineyard. She was an environmental engineer, worked for a water conservation nonprofit. Mr. Davis, she said, Daniel's told me about your agricultural technology work. I'd love to learn about sustainable irrigation systems. She spent the afternoon asking technical questions about water efficiency, soil conservation, renewable energy integration. Unlike Emily, Sarah was genuinely interested in environmental innovation rather than impressed by financial outcomes. Dad, Daniel said that evening, I want to ask you something.
What's that? Would you consider expanding Davis Agricultural Innovations? Maybe hiring additional engineers? Pursuing larger research contracts? What are you thinking? Climate change is creating massive demand for water-efficient agriculture. Our technology could scale globally. That would require significant investment and management expertise. I think I'm developing the management expertise, and we could partner with venture capital firms for expansion funding. Daniel was proposing to grow the business rather than simply inherit it. Let me think about expansion possibilities, I said. Dad, there's something else. What? Thank you for not giving up on me, for creating inheritance conditions that forced me to learn rather than just receive. Your mother's idea, actually. Then thank you both. We spent New Year's Eve planning business development strategies for 2025. Daniel had become the business partner Margaret and I had always hoped he could be. True wealth, it turns out, isn't inherited. It's earned through innovation, patience, and respect for the work that creates value. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know. What hidden talents are people underestimating in your family?